when someone invited me to church, I'm like, I'm not going to church. All they're going to do is ask for me. That was my perception of church, is all they do is ask people for money. I was like, not only do I...
Third offering, fourth offering.
I don't have any money. I'm broke. I'm a gambling addict. And I'm not giving you this money. What are you doing with this stupid money? Like I need it. You don't need it. You know. And so I had this very initially, I had this very, very tense I'm not giving the church money. I'm not doing it.
I was just getting ready to ask you that. Was that kind of like a hard thing for you?
Oh, very difficult.
Yeah.
And even when I first started going to church and I was getting fed by the word and I was enjoying the word and I was starting to see some breakthroughs in different areas of my life, my language, I'd stopped smoking. It's like some things that started to fall off, but I was still like, oof, about the money, you know? And I heard a lesson in February of 20. I remember it. There was this one sermon that changed my life. I mean, I've heard a lot of sermons over the years, but there was one. I learned 5 things in that sermon. I've done podcasts on this before, but I learned 5 things in that sermon that changed my life forever. And one of them was on the tithe and why we tithe and how it's important. For whatever reason.
Was it an in-person sermon?
It was in person, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a guest speaker.
Wow.
And
guest speaker speaking on tithing.
Bro.
Woo!
It wasn't just tithing. He talked about
tough...
marriage, tithing, prayer, and volunteering. He had a number of things that I had never done before. And I was like, hadn't been married, hadn't volunteered, hadn't tithed, and he just started. It was this amazing sermon. Anyway, so I was like, all right, I finally understood the tithe for the first time. It wasn't like the way he said it was, God doesn't need your money. God created money.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, that sentence was like a revolution.
Revelation.
Yeah, it was revelation. I was like, oh, that's right. Like he doesn't want this money because he needs it.
If he wanted, he could just take it. Exactly. He could just not provide it for you.
And so that finally flipped the thing in my brain that was stopping me from tithing. And also the aspect that God will give back those who tithe, and there was a reward aspect of tithing.
So,
and we'll reap. And so I started doing it. And so I've been tithing ever since. And I can tell you that I've made more money every year since I started tithing than the year before. And I've gone through a variety of different jobs and environments and seasons. So tithing works in my opinion.
Yeah. I went through times where I got to let the flesh get the best of me, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, if I do this, there's no way I'm gonna be late on this bill. And it always comes through, man. And it's just been it got to the point, because that was my big thing. It was like, oh man, I'm giving to a church, and my church is gonna hear this. Hey, I love you guys, and they all know. I think they probably all know this too. But it was like, oh man, if I'm giving this money, where's it going to? And I know that we have a lot of churches in the Philippines, but I don't see that. Yeah. So I think naturally, what people do is they see, okay, well, if we're giving all this money, where's all this money going to? Oh, it's just in the pastor's pocket or this, not taking consideration that, hey, the utilities and all these things that take to, have a church building.
Did you like that chair you sat in? We had to buy that.
That thing wasn't cheap. You're not in the folding metal chair. You're in a padded chair that cost, probably $100 and something per chair. And there's 700 of these chairs in here. But, people don't think of that. And, I didn't think of that in that moment. But yeah, man, it just got to a point where I couldn't get away from it in the word. And I was just like, man, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be obedient, you know? And then I started doing it, and I was like, dude, anytime it got to the point when my wife was just anytime we had a rough, she's like, did you tithe? That was the first thing.
She's calling you out.
She just wanted to make sure, because she was like, all right, if we're in a tight spot financially, she's like, well, she knows that if I tithe, there's nothing to worry about. She's like, well, did you tithe? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, well, don't worry about it. I'm like, what do you mean don't worry about it? Look at this bill.
Yeah,
where's it going to come? And it always came through, man.
Always, man. I've had a couple of miracle checks in the mailbox in my tithing season. You're like, this is tight, Lord. I don't know how this is going to happen. One of the biggest times, it's tithing is a weird subject, because it's everybody feels different about it, and everybody has different. But I can tell you that when I tithe, God really opened up the door to my finances. Mm. And as somebody who never managed money well, obviously as a gambler, I didn't have a history of knowing what to do with money.
Mm-hmm. Did you, just to kind of side note, was it something that was your family good with money, or was it just
no,
that was a big thing with me, is I was never taught how to manage money.
Ever. So. Yeah, it took Dave Ramsey to show up in my life for me to understand. I lost $500,000. Wow. And then when I got married, I wasn't gambling anymore, but I still didn't have any like structure to our spending. You know, we had a credit card. We were spending it. We bought laptops and you know, luckily Megan didn't have a car payment, so we didn't have like some major expense. She had student loans that we were just paying like monthly on. You know, like $50 a month, just like $25,000 in student loans. You know, we're like, we'll get there eventually. You know, like, and I think
chip away at.
You know, in my head I was just like, this is normal. You know, and just like every couple months our credit card bill would be $1,000 more than it was the month before, and we'd still just be paying that minimum payment or whatever. And so, but in my head I was like, I'm not gambling. I'm not spending my money unwisely. I'm just being normal.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I started tithing and then eventually Dave Ramsey showed up that like my whole thinking about stewardship changed. I think
I probably need to hear this
when stewardship is not just about not doing bad things with your money. That is not what stewardship is, you know. And I had to learn that lesson because I was like, God, look, I mean, I'm paying our rent on time, I'm paying our mortgage, you know, but it didn't feel like it was in order. You know what I'm saying? It's like I didn't go to the strip club, but I drove by it or something. You know, it's like I still felt like something was wrong. Yeah. You know, and so when Dave Ramsey started talking about, you know, the Bible verses about, you know, hastily spending money and getting things in order, I was just like, oh, all right. I felt that little tinge because I was working at a radio station. I didn't want to go to Dave Ramsey. I had seen his book at Lifeway. I worked at Lifeway. They had 1,000 of his books on the shelf, and I was like, who's this dude cutting up a credit card? Stupid. I got a credit card. I ain't trying to do all that. You know? But I'm in the radio station. I'm hearing him 2 hours, 3 hours every day while I work. You know, it's just like I'm hearing these testimonies, people getting out of debt. And I've never done any of this before. You know, I never even thought about it. It wasn't even that I was like actively not doing it. It's just I never thought about it. So God brought this tool of Dave Ramsey into my life, and I was like, well, let me try it. I told Megan, I was like, you want to try doing a budget? And like, we're like, what's budget? You know, and like I got all the Dave Ramsey spreadsheets out of my computer or whatever.
That's awesome.
And
apps and
and he didn't have apps back then.
And
so I'm like, well, let me just get out a sheet of paper, and it was the first time that I ever wrote down, what do you owe? What do you make?
Your income. What's your
and did the subtraction. That's it. It's like, what are your bills? Write them down. I've never done this before in 30 years of living. I never wrote down that I owe $50 for my electrical. I owe $20 to this. We have a medical bill. Blah blah. And the first time you see it, it's a little overwhelming. It's like if you took all the clothes in your closet and just piled them on your bed, like it's going to go to the ceiling. It feels like it's not that, not that much, but it's a lot in there.
Doesn't it blow your mind how much you spend on food though?
Oh,
I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's
before
if inflation. I just start doing ramen noodles every day, then I'll be in the hospital, like, you know, trying to take care.
Yeah, it does. We were obviously spending way more every month than we were taking in.
Yeah.
Even with our tithe, even with being able to pay the big bills, you know, we were overspending, and we were eating into whatever savings or whatever extra credit cards we had without even realizing that's where the money was going. So we started this plan in June of 2016, writing a budget down, and I think we cut out everything that was like we could live without. You know, it was like, all right, we have to make more than we're spending. You know, so it was the first time we were like, all right, we're not going to McDonald's. We're not going to this. And it was just me and Megan at this point, you know, or no, Maya was 1 year old. So we have 4 kids now. We had 1 kid when we started. And we had prayers to like put them in private school and I was like, we're never going to get to any of these things
if we don't make these adjustments.
But it wasn't easy. You know, the first few months it's like, we overspent again. You know, like I went to the movies, or I wanted to do this, or Testimony House had a thing, and I wanted to just get it done, so I paid for it, or whatever it was, you know.
Or it was more convenient because the kid, I think that was the biggest thing.
Convenience
That's the biggest
was a
thing
lot,
is for me. It's like, oh, dude, I don't want to sit down and freaking spend an hour to then you got to do the dishes and all this. Like, dude, it's so much work. Just go get something off the $5.
People tell me all the time, it costs just as much to get a meal at the grocery store and cook it. I was like,
no, it does not. That meal, I don't know last time especially now, like, dude, you go to a fast food spot, and this is with mine. That's what I imagine yours is probably like
the
40
first time
or 50.
I spent $50
Mine's like
at McDonald's,
35.
I was sick.
I was just like, oh my gosh, $35. I'm like, man, that's like 3 meals. I could go to Aldi right now and create 3 meals for $35.
Yeah,
you know.
That's a big part of what we had to figure out. So it was like, not only do we have to figure out what it is to have a budget, you have to figure out, well, what should we be spending on food? What should we be spending on, you know, these, you know, like gasoline? Like, should we be driving less to try and save some gasoline money and things like that? So eventually we got ourselves to a place. I think our first time that we had overage was like $40. and he teaches you to like pay your extra $40 on your credit card bill or whatever it is that your smallest debt, so that you can get that rush of finally paying off that first thing. And I think our first thing was like $200 or something. So it takes like 3 months to pay off $200 in debt, which is like today. Jeez. I mean, nothing. It's like nothing in today's world. You're like $200. I wish I only had $2. It's like, so it took us 4 years, 4 years to pay off $60,000.
Wow.
But in that time frame, we learned this is, and I'm talking about stewardship right now. So stewardship was not just, hey, don't spend your money on drugs and alcohol and gambling. Yeah. Stewardship was, don't do those things and make sure you're spending it wisely. Count the cost. Try to figure out what your plans are for the future and adjust for them. I had never done anything about retirement. Like there was I had a retirement account when I worked at the casino.
Wow.
And it would just get taken out of my check or whatever. I went up to the company match. But then, like, every 6 months when I was gambling, I'd take a loan against it to try to get some gambling money. So it's like, it was like my savings account, essentially. It wasn't really my...
They probably know. Yeah. I'm sure you weren't the only one doing that.
Oh, everybody who I worked with at the casino was doing some sort of payday loan, borrowing from their friends. Yeah. They had the casino.
That's a gambling thing,
this
bro.
This is how sick it is. The casino itself had a thing for employees where you could go against your next check.
Yeah.
I've never seen this at any other place I've ever worked. You could go into HR and be like, "Hey, I'd like an advance on my next paycheck."
And the interest rate was
there was nothing. There was nothing. It was just like, "Yeah, we'll give it to you." And so your the check afterwards would be like little.
So you don't have anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And people were doing this all the time. So I mean, money was not something that was being taught.
Wow.
in my circle of people. So that's why it was so revolutionary for my life when I finally started doing this thing, and why I talk about Dave Ramsey and his plan ad nauseum, because I know now that it works. Yeah, because not only did I pay $60,000 off in debt over 4 years, the next 12 calendar months, we made $60,000 in money.
Sheesh.
Extra.
Come on.
So we went from 4 years of paying off $60,000 in debt to we have $60,000 in surplus. We paid for 2 cars with cash. We sent our kids to private school. Wow. All this stuff started to happen because I'm tithing, because I'm stewarding my money differently. Yeah. We had some raises along the way, and things are just different. Bro. You know what I'm saying? And so... But I absolutely believe that none of that would have happened if I didn't do the first thing. That took a long time. And I can tell you that we skipped a lot of restaurant meals. We skipped a lot of movie dates. We skipped a lot of things that, sacrificed for 4 years. Using hand-me-down everything for Maya, for James. Nothing in our closets was new from Target. Nothing. It was all like, what do your sister got?
Did you just say Target?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Oh, you're a Christian. How did you say
this
Target?
Was 2018. This is 2018. I'm better now. I'm sanctified. So it's just different, man. So that goes along with the tithing. So I think for me, I always tell people, watch what you're doing with your money, and it'll bless your future if you just get it in order. There's a lot of people around my circles at church, because church teaches it a lot. So I've taught the Dave Ramsey class to the church. Yeah. And people were like, I got this figured out. There's a lot of older people in the class, typically.
Wow.
And they're set in their ways about money.
Yeah.
And these are Christians. A lot of them like been Christian longer than me, but they're telling me like our last class, Freedom, there was like 30 people in it. Okay.
Wow,
it's a big
huge
class. And we've had bigger. So our 2 classes ago we had like 90. Okay. Our last class, 30 people. 90. And one of the activities we do is that we
I don't even get that for prayer night.
Yeah. Money. People think they're going to get out of debt, get rich, So one of the activities, you don't put your name on it, but you share how much debt you have, right? After you do your first budget, you say this.
You tell that in front of everybody.
You don't say freedom. You write it on a sheet of paper, and they accumulate it. You don't put your name on it or whatever. $1.2 million.
Somebody had
the group
total. Wow.
And that was without houses. That's without houses. That's not mortgage debt.
So
it's non-mortgage debt.
So student loans,
and
car note.
Car notes, whatever the thing is, that you're paying for.
Credit cards. Credit cards.
Credit cards are a big one,
Well, rent wouldn't be considered debt. No. Debt. It would just
Dave Ramsey. Yeah. Dave Ramsey considers mortgage. It is debt, but he doesn't consider it part of your baby step 2.
Yeah.
So, but $1.2 million. These are from mostly Christians who are seasoned veterans of the faith.
Wow.
We don't have money in order in our churches. You might be tithing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you're stewarding what that money is.
Yeah, man, that's challenging, bro.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it works if you work it. And it's just like anything else.
Yeah, and like I've seen certain people in the church, and like and I'm just like, man, what are they doing different that I'm not doing? Because I'll see some of these people, I'm like, man, posting up on Instagram all their, vacation things.
Credit
I'm like,
cards.
geez, Louis.
Their credit card
But
vacation.
no, these are people that like now they have like Airbnbs at places and they have like all these investments that they're invested in. I'm like, dude, where do they get like? And they didn't. And we have natural tendency to say, oh well, they got it. They had a silver spoon. They come from rich family. But these are people that weren't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what did they do? But these are all tithing people. But then I see on the other side of it, it's like these people that are struggling. I'm like, well, what are they doing that they're not doing? Yeah. So, man, yeah, I think that was like one of the biggest challenges, for me as far as the tithing part was just like, man, we constantly think, oh, well, this money is, it's going to be abused. It's not, or like, what's it going to go to? And it's like, well, why do they need my money? And I just getting that revelation of it's like, they don't need your money. And I've had our pastor even say that before. Hey, just so you guys know, we don't need your money.
I love it.
If like this ministry is going to survive and it's going to thrive, regardless whether you tithe or not. This is a matter of you being obedient to what God says.
And that's true.
And that's basically what it was. Got to be like, man, like they're not my measly 100 or my measly 20 or whatever it was at the time. It's like, dude, that's not gonna break them. Like mine would barely pay for groceries for somebody for a week. So
but
it's
it
not
might
gonna
break
do anything
you.
in church. Yeah,
it might break you.
Yeah, and that was the big thing. Was like, oh well, it got to a point where it's like, oh yeah, freedom. Your faith is because I had like crazy faith and to see like all this miraculous stuff.
Not to throw that at you.
Yeah, here we go. But I had like this like to believe for all this stuff, but it was like I didn't have faith to trust God that like, hey, look, if I took this money out of my bills, that he wouldn't be able to do it. It's like, man, what's harder for God to do? Give me, or provide for this bill that I don't have, or to heal somebody of cancer or something like that. So, yeah, it was definitely a big faith step for me. But yeah, now that I look back and I'm like, man, I can't. I wish I would have started tithing earlier. Yeah, in my walk.
Which is easier, to forgive sin or heal this man and get up and walk? Yeah. It's like that reminded me of that story because it is a big step of faith to do any sort of stewardship. Whether I'm talking about, like, for me, I'll tell you the first thing, I don't steward my body. Like, so like I can give you all the lessons on Dave Ramsey and your money, but the second we start talking about exercise and eating right and all that stuff, like I am the $1.2 million in calorie debt. You know what I'm saying? Like
You're trying to do that meat diet, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not that I haven't tried things, and it's not that I'm lighter than I used to be, but it's like I don't have this stewardship down
It's just
yet.
that revelation. The same way with the tithe thing is just has the money, or the Dave Ramsey thing. It has to be a message that you hear that God's going to speak, and it's going to be, it's going to connect with you.
Yeah, so it's not like I'm like coming down on everybody who's got debt. It's like I get it, man. Like I have my own areas of life where I'm trying to work it out still. So